Come on, get out of my way. I'm gonna start punching people. I'm driving a Camaro. Today I'm driving this beautiful 1996 Camaro Z28 SS in Mystic Teal Metallic. This thing is a time capsule with only 65,000 kilometers on the clock. It's a true survivor. Now this is a pretty special car, and it's not just because it was my dad's retirement gift to himself. You see, the 1996 model of the Camaro SS stands out from all the other 4th gen Camaros because it was the first year that Chevy brought it back after discontinuing the SS for 24 years. So in order to sort of test the waters on bringing back the SS model back to the market, they sent a few Z28s to Street Legal Performance, aka SLP. And that's where they had them converted to this SS package, and they were there for about 2 days. So that means that this was the only year that the car wore both the Z28 and the SS badges, and it was the only year that it was outsourced to a performance shop. In the end, there was 2,263 of these Z28 SS Camaros, and this car is actually car number 59 according to the plaque in the interior. And this car is even more special because according to the appraisal that was done on it, this is believed to be one of 7. As far as this color and these features: automatic transmission, manual windows, hardtop. This one is not a T-roof or a Targa. So what makes this an SS? What was included in the package? Well, for starters, we gotta pop the hood. Look at how beautiful this interior is. It's like brand new in here. These came with a 5.7 liter LT1 V8, which was before the time of the LS, but these LTs are actually really good engines as well. And the SS model was bumped up to 305 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque, which was a pretty decent increase over the regular Z28's 275 horsepower. They also came with a Torsen limited slip diff in the rear end. They also came with a ram air hood, which is definitely noteworthy. You can tell one of these SS models when they're driving behind you. And it's functional. It runs right through into this different intake that these cars had with the exposed filter. The SS also came with stiffer suspension and a bigger sway bar up front here to help it to handle a little bit better in the corners. It also came with these 17-inch aluminum wheels that are very similar to the Corvette ZL1, if not exactly the same. And get this thing has 275s on all 4 corners, so we got some serious mechanical grip for what most people would consider like a straight line muscle car. This thing can actually handle pretty well. Out back here we have the SLP exhaust. Many people have nicknamed it the 2 on the left exhaust. And it sounds great for a like somewhat factory exhaust. These, I think, increased about 5 horsepower. Not a big deal. Definitely helped with the character of the car, made it sound better. As far as I know, this exhaust ended up being banned for noise violations in 1997, 1 year later. Not in all places. I think it was like in states like California, which you would expect are a little bit more strict on things like that. Some other noteworthy changes: they added an oil cooler to it. We had some very subtle SS badging. Back here you just have the bow tie and the SS, and then it was badged on the wheels, and they just had these really subtle SS badges on the fenders. They also came with very rare floor mats. Again, they were badged as Z28 and SS on the same floor mat, and this was the only year they had those, and unfortunately they didn't make it with this car. I don't know who's got them or where they are, but they're like impossible to track down. So if any of you guys know where to find the Z28 SS floor mats, please let us know, because I'm sure my dad would love to get his hands on those. Let's talk performance figures. So these cars will do 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds. And the quarter mile in 13.5 at 104 miles per hour. I think that's what Car and Driver did with this. And by today's standards, it's not like rocket ship quick. It's not crazy, but considering what it is, and from the mid-90s, I think it's very respectable, and it's definitely a quick car on paper and in real life. But guys, look at how pristine this engine bay is. It really is like brand new. The only thing that was damaged or broken on this when my dad got it was these things, these plastic caps. They all get brittle and break on these cars, so he had to spend a whopping $30 for a new one of those. The other issue with these LTs is the OptiSpark. It's a known problem with them that they do fail at a certain mileage. This one is holding up okay, but it is something that you kind of have to budget for and be prepared for if you're going to buy one of these LT powered cars. All right, let's travel back in time to 1996, because that's exactly what it feels like driving this car. It really is a time capsule. I have to be honest, right out of the gate, I'm actually a little bit cramped in this car, believe it or not. I'm a fairly taller driver, but this is a big car. I shouldn't be cramped, and yet I feel like I wish I could move my seat back like another 2 or 3 inches. I'd be really comfortable then. Luckily, this car's an automatic, but if this was a 6-speed manual, I think I might have some trouble with getting my feet on the clutch and stuff. I'm a little bit, like, my knees are kind of cramped to the point where when I turn left, the turn signal is actually hitting me on the knee. I'm comfortable though, I will say that, and I could drive long distances like this. It's just, I think this car doesn't necessarily have like a really sporty driving position right out of the gate. I feel a little bit more natural with sort of like a gangster lean. You know, like this is not like the most sporty steering wheel ever sold in a car. But the thing is, all of these things, they go completely out the window as soon as you hear that exhaust behind you. Man, this SLP exhaust sounds so good with this LT1. It's kind of funny because when my dad bought this car, I told him like, oh man, one of the first things we got to do is we got to put a nice loud exhaust on that thing. And then he brought it home and I heard it and I thought, you know what? It actually sounds really good right from the factory. And, you know, it's not very loud from the outside, but from the inside it's got just the right amount of growl that it feels like you're driving a muscle car. This isn't going to get mistaken with something else, I don't think. But yeah, overall, such a great sounding engine and great sounding exhaust. The brakes are, well, they're there. We do have brakes. I think this car probably has the original brakes on it from when it was sold brand new, but they're okay in stock form. I think if you were going to modify the car and make more power and stuff, you might want to upgrade them. They have enough power. I think they could use maybe a little bit more bite. So maybe even just upgrading the pads would be good. Ride quality is good too, for sure. This is, despite being sort of like the track focused car from back in the 90s, the track focused cars were not track focused the way that current cars are track focused, if you know what I mean. They kind of sold them as track focused. They put some big wide beefy tires on them, but you know, oh, it sounds great. You got the bassy feel in this car, the real low end power. I think it makes about 330 pound-feet of torque, and if so, that is pretty much on par with my V8 4Runner, but it's kind of strange because this feels way torquier than my 4Runner does. The power is delivered differently, I guess. This feels like it's got a lot more low-end grunt, I think, and it definitely feels like you're driving a Camaro or you're driving a muscle car. I think a common complaint that people might have with this car, and I'm sure we'll probably see it in the comments, is the fact that it's an automatic. And I kind of felt the same way too. When he was shopping, he was looking at 6-speed manuals and stuff, and I told him, you know, that's probably gonna be a better investment. I think they're gonna hold their value more. But then he drove this auto, and it just, for him specifically, it just worked really well because he wants this car to be more of a cruiser, you know. So he has a Harley Davidson that he's owned for quite a few years, and it's his baby. He loves taking it out. But one of his biggest complaints was, you know, it's not like it's a bagger or something, it's a wide glide, so he's exposed. There's no fairing, no windshield, no anything, and it's just like my bike, not fun to ride in the rain. And if you're wanting to go out of town on a Saturday and you're looking at the skies, you're looking at the forecast, and you're thinking, oh, it might rain, typically with the Harley, he might be kind of questioning whether or not he wants to go very far. And so the purpose of this car was to be kind of like a Harley with a roof, that he doesn't have to worry about weather. If he gets caught in the rain, it's not the end of the world. You put the wipers on and you keep on trucking. So for that purpose, I think an automatic version is okay. And the fact that this is more rare because it's an automatic, I think that'll help it with its future value as sort of a collector car. Let's talk about the automatic specifically in this car. And I don't know, what is it, guys? Is it a 4L80 or a 4L60 or something? Or is it? It's not a 700R4, is it? I'm not even sure. I probably should have researched that before I filmed this video. But so it is not the most refined transmission by a long shot. It's very clunky. It's very, I don't know if it'll even show up on camera, but when you're pulling out in first gear, it'll lurch forward when you shift into second gear. It's got a very hard kind of a slam into second gear. Some people would complain about that and say that, you know, it's a clunky transmission, and I think it's important that you consider the vehicle that this transmission is in. You know, this is meant to be a red light racer. These cars are known for squawking the tires into second gear when you give them some throttle. And if you want something to feel super refined and super smooth, I think you get a Bentley. You don't get a 1990s Camaro. You have to manage your expectations here a little bit and understand what you're driving. Yeah, this is a very direct power delivery on this car. I really love that, man. Compared to a lot of the modern cars that I'm complaining about, you know, the gas pedal just doesn't feel very connected to your foot with the drive-by-wire and stuff. That is not the case with this old girl, that is for sure. You can definitely tell that this thing has 275s on the front because it's kind of hard to explain. It has, you can feel a lot of mechanical grip, but it's weird. There's a certain amount of slack in the top end of the steering wheel, and yet this is also, you can tell, a very quick steering rack in this car. I don't know if they changed that over the base model Camaros. I don't know. But you don't have to, you know, crank and crank when you're turning a tight corner on this steering wheel. It's a very quick ratio, which is pretty cool. I didn't really expect this car to handle the way that it does, to be honest. I'm quite surprised by that. And I think the big beefy front tires play a big role in that. And it's nice, you know, like this is taking it back to the days where if a car handled well, it's because mechanically it handled well. It was physically stuck to the road, and it didn't have a bunch of, you know, electronics and algorithms running with different computers taking measurements and adjusting things. There's none of that going on here. We barely have fuel injection in this thing. Oh, listen to that though. Oh, I'm so glad that this car sounds the way that it does, because this is exactly what a muscle car should sound like, I think. And it's not loud enough that it's going to annoy you either. I think you can definitely take this car on a long drive, and there's no drone or anything. It's totally livable. It's just when you get on the loud pedal, it's nice and loud. It does feel more like a sport tuned suspension, and in a way that is a pleasant surprise, because I was thinking this car, based on looks and what I know about them, it was gonna be a bit of a boat, and it really isn't. I think that's probably what surprises me the most about this car, is that it's actually pretty well rounded, despite what we've kind of been led to believe about muscle cars, like, you know, the pony cars, the Mustangs, the Camaros, especially in the 90s. I know the modern ones are really well tuned and good designs in those cars, but the older ones, I think, had a bit of a reputation for being just sort of straight line cars, and that was it. You know, you heard me say in some of my other driving videos that modern cars are just so easy to drive. They practically drive themselves, and that is really not the case with this car. And I mean that in a good way, because this is definitely giving me like much more of a driving experience. It feels like I'm driving the car, but it's like, you know, this shifter, to get it out of park and into drive, you have to really squeeze it and really manhandle it. Even, you know, the turn signal stock, you have to push it really hard and get it to actually engage. It makes kind of a plasticky click. We got manual windows. I mean, even stuff like the doors on this car are really heavy and big. Got plenty of ground clearance here, so no worries on some of these big inclines. But this is like, you really have to work when you're driving this car, but it's a good kind of work. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the interior, guys, because I know, like, we all know that the 90s and early 2000s was not the best era for North American car interiors. You know, we can just say that. So I went into driving this car with sort of that preconceived notion that all of these cars, whether that's the Mustangs or the Camaros, whatever, the interiors are kind of little rattle boxes. And respectfully, I would say that this car is just what I was expecting it to be like. You know, we've got some squeaks and some rattles and some clunks in here. Keep in mind that this is about as good of an example of a 4th gen Camaro as I think you're gonna find, aside from maybe like a total bubble car that has never been driven. I mean, 65,000 kilometers, what is that, about 40,000 miles? This interior is essentially brand new, and I don't know if you can hear it on camera, but we've got some creaking down here. She's plastic fantastic in here, folks, just like you would expect. But enough time has passed that I feel like that adds to sort of the personality of this car, and it's fitting. It's kind of what you would expect. We know that these cars, that wasn't their strong suit. It's a muscle car. And I think it would almost be a little bit disappointing if the interior was better than I was thinking. So, I mean, everything's holding together okay. It's not like it's damaged or worn out or anything. It's in great shape. It makes some noises. On this rough road, the suspension is handling pretty well. I think it's kind of fair to compare this to a modified car as opposed to a stock suspension because, you know, SLP essentially modified the suspension from what Chevy came out with. And it does a pretty good job. I mean, it's not, over the rough roads, it is not the, you know, the best tuned suspension, but it's doing an okay job. I'm not getting thrown around or anything. I'm in control, and this wouldn't be my first choice of car for this road, for sure, but I think that can be said for a lot of cars with more performance tuned suspension. One thing I will say though is that as surprised as I am with the handling of this car being as good as it is, you can still just tell where this car is at home. And it's not in the twisties. It's not like canyon carving or on the road course. It can probably do it decently. But this car just feels so at home on the highway, like on the open road. Anything above like 80 kilometers an hour, the car just kind of like, you know, hunkers down and settles in and just gets comfortable, and you don't feel like you're going very fast at all, even though you are. And then of course there's, you know, the whole stoplight to stoplight. This thing will squawk the tires for you. It's great out of the hole. Definitely lots of fun to be, you know, going from a dig in a car like this. Wow, okay, that's got some power to it for sure. And I think the gearing is actually pretty long in this, so I feel like if this had shorter gearing, it would probably just be roasting the tires everywhere it goes, because man, that engine really comes alive when you actually give it some throttle. There's just too many people on the streets right now for me to really drive too spiritedly, but it's so docile at low speeds that you kind of forget this is still a Camaro deep down. Yeah, it's nice and easy to drive at slow speeds, but man, as soon as you get on it, this thing, it really racks up speed really effortlessly and really quick. Visibility is actually pretty good. Forward visibility is really good on this car. Rearward, not amazing. I mean, you do have a nice big rear window, which is good, but those C-pillars are pretty beefy and they create a bit of a blind spot for you. You definitely have to have your mirrors set up on this car to be able to see if there's anybody beside you if you're trying to merge or something. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Yeah, she's a 90s GM, folks. It's okay. I really like the fact that you can just barely see the SS hood scoop peeking out over in the bottom of the windshield here. I think that adds a little personality here too. It kind of reminds you, this is not just a regular Camaro that you're driving. And then, man, as soon as you give it a little touch of the gas pedal, the sound definitely reminds you that this is not just a regular Camaro. There's just something about this thing, it just makes you want to drive around punching people. I love it. You know, when my dad bought this car, I actually drove it home for him. He bought it in Niagara Falls, and so we drove home through Hamilton. And if you're not familiar, for my American friends, Hamilton is sort of like Ontario's version of Detroit. It's like a steel town, kind of rough and tumble, lots of steel mills everywhere. Ooh, okay. Almost lost the tires going around the corner there. I mean, I don't see any traction control button on this thing, so I'm assuming it doesn't have anything, and it feels like it'll let you do whatever you decide to do. So if you have a history of making stupid choices and bad decisions, this car is going to let you make stupid choices and bad decisions. Anyways, so I was driving this home through Hamilton, and it just felt so fitting. Driving through the industrial roads and the you know, going past all the steel mills. There's like a permanent haze in Hamilton of just pollution and dirtiness, and you got to be kind of tough to live in Hamilton. Again, it's kind of like Detroit. And this car, man, it felt right at home driving around on those streets. It's an experience, and I totally understand that it's not for everybody. And I know that on this channel, we do talk a lot about Toyotas and about Japanese cars. And there's a good chance that, you know, a lot of you are maybe not going to respond well to this car. But in my previous video that I made about my advice from 39 years of being a car enthusiast, one of those things that I said was keep your mind open and don't just stick to one brand and or one type of vehicle and think that everything automatically sucks. This is a very good example of that, because I'm a Toyota fan through and through. I wouldn't typically think that a 4th gen Camaro would be something on my shopping list for myself, and yet I am so glad that my dad bought this car. I feel like it suits him perfectly, by the way. This is his 4th Camaro that he's owned. He owned 3 other ones, I think a 77 and a 78, and then an 84 Z28, I believe, and now this car. And he got rid of his Camaro because he had to be a family man, and he needed something more practical for a family. So he sold his Camaro and bought a rust-colored Corolla sedan. And nobody deserves this car more than he does now, because he worked, I think, 45 years at his job, and just a good blue-collar dude that put his family first. And when, you know, we weren't relying on him anymore and he was able to retire, now he decided to treat himself, and I think this is the perfect car for him. Oh, I love it. You could get in a lot of trouble with this car. It's just so much fun. I also really love the fact that he bought this car in the Mystic Teal Metallic color. I think it suits this thing so well. I don't know how rough these train tracks are. Oh, that's not bad. I think the color of this car suits it perfectly. It looks so 90s, and obviously that's fitting. It's a 90s car, but throw it into a corner here. But it handles surprisingly really well. I think it's a little bit deceiving because the seat is not very sporty. There's not a whole lot of lumbar support in the seat. And again, I mentioned the steering wheel. If you were to swap those 2 items out in this car, it would feel like a race car in the corners, I think. Like it's very impressive for what it is, for sure. And these cars weigh what, 3,200, 3,300 pounds? By 90s standards, that was kind of porky. You know, these things were kind of considered boats. But you have to remember that that was back when a Honda Civic weighed 2,400 pounds. What does a Civic weigh nowadays? I don't know, probably 3,000 or so. Come on, get out of my way. I'm gonna start punching people. I'm driving a Camaro. But guys, I'm telling you, keep your mind open when it comes to trying new cars and new things, because this is so far away from my MR2 and what my MR2 is. But they're both 90s cars, and when you put them side by side, back in the 90s, they would have been like oil and water. They wouldn't have belonged together at all. But now, in 2024, seeing those 2 cars together is so cool. It just seems so fitting to see them kind of buddy-buddy. Another thing that these 4th gen Camaros have going for them is that they are absolute bargains. And right now, I'm sure you're aware that most of the 90s sports cars, especially the Japanese ones, are all just skyrocketing in values. The prices have all gone crazy. And for some reason, at least at this point right now that I'm filming this video, these Camaros are kind of squeaking through. And you can pick one of these things up for an absolute smoking deal. And you get a lot of car for the money. And yeah, like the dials and everything are all kind of cheap plastic parts bin stuff, but it takes you back to an era in the 90s when that's what cars were like. Cars have become too good now, to the point where they have no soul. They have no feeling when you're driving them. You feel so disconnected with the world around you. And this car, I have no desire to turn whatever this crappy stereo is on. I want to hear that LT1, and I want to hear the world around me. I want that raw driving experience. These cars can definitely provide that for you. It's something that you're not going to get in a new car. Gearing wise in this thing, you know, I'm hitting what, 120 kilometers an hour here, allegedly. We're at like 2,500 RPM. It's just cruising. No problems. It's very at home at highway speeds like this. As soon as you tap on the gas, it's going to drop a gear, and there's plenty of power on tap at any moment. It's just really an all-around great driver. So what are my takeaways here? The interior is pretty much what you'd expect it to be. Reliability, these cars are pretty good, as far as I know. Straight line speed, I think it's pretty much what you'd expect. Maybe a little bit better. I think even for today's standards, this is a pretty quick car in a straight line. The biggest surprise overall, though, is actually how well it handles in the corners. That's a very pleasant surprise on this car. Love the styling, love the color, love the sound of that SLP exhaust with the LT1. I don't know, I'm in love with this car. I really think that my dad got a good one, and I am looking forward to seeing him enjoy this car and rack up the miles, because even though this is a low mileage example, he's not afraid to drive this thing. He's going to be out enjoying it and putting some mileage on it. So let me know what you guys think. Are you a fan of the 90s American cars compared to, say, the Japanese classics like the Supra and the NSX and stuff? I think they all provide a similar level of nostalgia, and they all drive a little different for sure, but they all take you back to that same time in life when things were a little simpler, and I really love it. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.